So moral of the story here is if the functional impact of the retained reflex is negatively impacting the child or the adult, we need to intervene. If the reflex, you test it and it's positive, but it's not necessarily impacting the child in a functional way, maybe we don't focus on that reflex and we do other interventions instead. So testing, every month or two, like Jessica mentioned, making sure that we are making progress and we're intervening successfully is also really important to make sure that we are seeing progress, and just keep it play-based, keep it function-based, and just make it fun. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Jessica, and this is All Things Sensory by Harkla.
We are both certified occupational therapy assistants, and together with Harkla, we are on a mission to empower parents, therapists, and educators to help raise confident and strong children of all abilities.
On this podcast, we chat about all things sensory, diving into special needs, occupational therapy, parenting, self-care, overall health and wellness, and so much more.
We are here to provide raw, honest, and fun strategies, ideas, and information for parents, therapists, and educators, as well as other professionals to implement into daily life.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey there, welcome back to All Things Sensory by Harkla. We're so happy to have you here today. I'm Rachel.
I'm Jessica.
And today we're talking about one of our favorite things, which is primitive reflexes.
Yeah, we're going to talk about kind of the functional aspect of primitive reflex integration, because we get this question a lot in our digital course on how do I know if the reflex is integrated or not? Do we retest? How do we know if what we're doing is working?
And also, let's say a primitive reflex tests positive, so we have a retained reflex, and then we go through our symptom checklist, and the child isn't necessarily struggling with this reflex being retained. Do we intervene? Do we not? Another common question that we get, and we're going to dive into that today.
Yep. So when we're talking about primitive reflex integration, we want to talk about what does the test tell us about the primitive reflex? Are we seeing a positive result during the test? And then we also want to talk about what are the functional day-to-day symptoms of that reflex. Because kind of like what you said, if we have a positive result during the test, but we're not seeing functional challenges, we don't necessarily need to intervene.
Yeah.
But vice versa, if we do the test and it's like a 1 or even a 0, meaning that the test doesn't show the reflexes retained, but on the checklist, the child is showing functional day-to-day signs of challenges, then what do we do?
And that's literally what happened to me the other week. I tested a kiddo, or I was doing a virtual session and the mom tested the kiddo, and the Moro looked completely integrated. And going through the checklist of the symptoms that they're struggling with, it was like, check, all these things. And I said, because your checklist is showing that we are struggling with a lot of the same symptoms of a retained Moro reflex, let's go ahead and intervene. Let's start with the Moro reflex and see if we can help in that area, see if it is related to a Moro reflex, because sometimes that anxiety, that gravitational insecurity, the nervousness, sometimes that's not always related to a retained Moro. Sometimes it's another cause, and so ruling out the reflexes is helpful too.
Yeah. And then kind of going back to what I said at the beginning, we get this question all the time typically from therapists saying, we did the primitive reflex test, we worked on the exercises, the family was consistent, we do the test again, but we're not sure if it's integrated. How do we know? And I always refer those people back to the checklist that's inside the course to say, make sure you're having the families fill out the checklist before integration exercises happen, and then do it again 1 to 2 months later and see if you notice any changes.
Yes, definitely.
Now, according to AOTA, we have to make sure that we are focusing on occupational outcomes, right? We have to link all of our treatment interventions to the client's, in this case, the child's functional day-to-day occupations.
Yes. Now, this used to be the Choosing Wisely guidelines, and they recently changed it to the Practice Smart guidelines. We'll link it in the show notes notes so that way you can review it if you are interested. But it's just an important thing to keep in mind when you are providing primitive reflex interventions, because we're not doing just rote, boring, repetitive exercises to integrate these reflexes. We want to make sure that it does go into that functional play-based intervention strategy rather than just, boring exercises over and over again. So always link it back to play, occupation-based. Like we mentioned earlier, if we're not seeing the reflex negatively impact the child, then per AOTA, we don't want to be just providing interventions just to provide interventions.
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to go through some of the different primitive reflexes and talk about the functional challenges and the impact on ADLs, play, school, to just really kind of drive it home of like, these reflexes, when they are retained, can have a true impact on day-to-day life. So we'll start with the Moro reflex. The main impact that it has is it causes an overreaction to sensory input, to sudden noises, to touch. The child is going to be in a state of fight or flight and high anxiety. And so this is going to cause challenges with daily routines, challenges with focus and attention, challenges at school. We've talked about your brother before and how he would cover his ears when he thought that the fire alarm was going to go off at school, and that impacted his ability to participate in school activities. So a retained Moro reflex can have that impact on day-to-day life for our kids.
Definitely. The next one is the asymmetrical tonic neck reflex, or the ATNR. And this one really focuses on splitting the body in half, left and right. So we see a functional impact of bilateral coordination as well as crossing midline. So if you have a child trying to do a cross crawl and they're only touching the same elbow to the same leg rather than fluidly being able to cross midline, that can also really negatively impact their ability to get through their day, getting dressed, writing, reading, even like navigating their environment safely as they get older, driving a car, riding a bike, all of those, just play-based activities and motor movements, playing sports, those can be really negatively impacted by that ATNR.
I was even thinking establishing a hand dominance. We just had a question about this in our classroom course, actually. Somebody was asking about hand dominance in preschoolers, and this was my first thought, was they might have a retained ATNR, because as they are maybe drawing or practicing writing their name, if they're not able to cross midline because that ATNR is stuck, then they're going to be constantly switching hands back and forth.
Yeah. The next one is the symmetrical tonic neck reflex, or the STNR. And remember, this one splits the body in half from top to bottom. And so we see this one impact our posture, functional movements. Anytime the eyes or the head, extend, the neck goes up, then we're going to get a muscle tone change from our lower body. Same with neck flexion and eyes looking down. We're going to get that significant muscle tone change, which if you haven't read the book Stopping ADHD, it talks solely about the STNR and its impact across all areas. It's a great book. I recommend it. But functional challenges, we see anything from sitting in like a good postured position at the table, copying from the board, swimming, riding a bike, really just anything that requires head position changes and, lower body maintaining a still position or doing a movement that's opposite from the upper body.
Did you mention toileting in relation to that?
No.
So then, toilet training, potty training is going to be difficult as well.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. Next would be the tonic labyrinthine reflex, which is the TLR. This reflex directly impacts muscle tone and posture, as well as balance. So things like getting dressed and being able to balance on one leg to put your pants on, being able to sit at the table to eat a meal. We're going to see a lot of like slouching, hunched over, basically weak core muscles, which impacts a child's ability ability to move around their environment, be able to sit upright to play games or eat meals. They're going to lose their balance frequently, so this could even be a safety issue for some children. And then there's also an impact with ocular motor skills, which we've talked about pretty extensively on this podcast. But for a child to be able to visually track an item, for them to play catch with a ball, reading and writing, all of it's going to be impacted.
Yeah, definitely. This is a big one too. I see day to day with my own kids. Lately, they've been putting a chair in the sandbox, standing on the chair, and then looking up and trying to grab one of these little crab apples off the tree. And what I notice is, are they comfortable enough to look up, extend their neck, and reach up? What you'll see with a retained TLR is anytime they look up, they're gonna, shift their posture completely forward. They're gonna be extremely uncomfortable. They're not gonna be able to reach their hands up, and they'll probably get a muscle tone change in their lower body as well when they are looking up. And every time they do that, I'm like, oh, there's that TLR in action. Woo-hoo.
Which your kids are at the age where it's like starting to integrate.
Yeah,
because
sure.
Austin is almost 3.
She just turned 3.
She just turned 3. So,
yeah.
Next is the spinal galant reflex. This one is going to have a big impact on fidgeting, sensitivity to touch, and toileting. So for a child, to be able to tolerate different types of clothing, for them to remain seated and attend to a tabletop task, especially at school, it's going to look like they have ants in their pants. So we're going to see a lot of ADHD symptoms. And then toileting, the spinal galant, there's a lot of research that shows the impact of a retained spinal galant reflex and, potty training success, IBS, nighttime bedwetting, and these are all day-to-day functional occupations that are going to be impacted.
Did you know that I contributed to a research article on IBS?
Did you really?
I don't think I told you this.
No, you didn't tell anyone.
I know. I was just thinking about it because it's a coworker, kind of a coworker, but he was writing a research article on IBS, and I was like, oh, there's a connection with retained reflexes, the spinal galant. He's like, oh, would you like to contribute to the research article? And it just got published.
You'll have to link it for everyone.
So there you go. If you guys are curious and you want to learn more about it,
I have to stop keeping these secrets.
It's just, there's too much. So anyways, the spinal galant and IBS and potty training, nighttime bedwetting. I actually have a friend right now who's doing like sit walk activities every night because her 4, almost 5-year-old, she's like, she can't make it through the night without pull-ups on. And I was like, oh, you should try doing sit walks and see if
how's it going.
They just recently started.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
TBD. Yes.
We'll bring it up later.
Yeah. I know.
Hopefully.
We'll try to remember. Okay, we've got the Palmar grasp reflex next, and this one connects with our fine motor skills. We've got our grasp, we've got our release, we've got our pencil grip, and this one we see a connection with using eating utensils, writing utensils, tactile sensitivity. We think about playing with sensory bins or getting our hands messy. Sometimes that makes us uncomfortable as well. And then we can also see overflow associated movements with this one. Sometimes it's the Palmar reflex and the rooting reflex. Sometimes it's the Babkin reflex. But when the mouth is doing a specific movement, we see a similar movement with our hands and vice versa. And we just want to make those neural pathways a little bit more efficient so that way we can separate what the hands and the mouths are doing. Because if you think about an infant, you'll see that same response when they're nursing. Their hands are going to be doing the same suckling, not suckling motion, but like
open and close,
just like their mouth is doing, and that's the reflex at work. So it's cool. It's fascinating.
It is. Next is the rooting and suck reflexes. We like to just kind of put these two together because they're so connected, but these two reflexes are going to have a huge impact on oral motor development, which from a functional standpoint is going to impact feeding. So in infancy, being able to tolerate different textures as the child gets older. We all know that toddlers go through picky eating stages, but if we have clients who are chronic picky eaters, who have very limited food rapport, we do want to look at their rooting and suck reflexes. That's a very, very occupation-based impact. And then even speech and articulation delays and challenges. So our speech therapist, this could be something for you to look into as well.
Yep. So moral of the story here is kind of going back to the basics here. If the functional impact of the retained reflex is negatively impacting the child or the adult, we need to intervene. If the reflex, you test it and it's positive, but it's not necessarily impacting the child in a functional way, maybe we don't focus on that reflex and we do other interventions instead. So testing, every month or two, like Jessica mentioned, making sure that we are making progress and we're intervening successfully is also really important to make sure that we are seeing progress, and just keep it play-based, keep it function-based, and just make it fun.
Yeah, we just have to remember to look at the whole picture. I think sometimes we get so stuck on like just the test or just the checklist or just this reflex, but we have to look at the child as a whole and identify the reflex, the functional impact, the family dynamic, the environment. We have to look at all of the pieces together because they all have an impact.
Yeah,
definitely. So we have to remember that too.
Yeah.
We do have a listener question. It's kind of long. Do you want to read it?
Sure. Great. Okay. Listener question. Hello. Your podcast has been so helpful for my son who is 5 and diagnosed with autism and ADHD. Yay. Glad to hear that it's been helpful. He would definitely benefit from an OT, but unfortunately there are none available in our area. He is a high sensory seeker and I'm more of an avoider, which is tough for both of us. I started borrowing his noise canceling headphones when he is seeking auditory input because what he craves is uncomfortable and painful for me. For example, loud singing gives me a headache, or he has so much movement going on that I start to feel dizzy and nauseous. I tried your sensory diet idea, but found his sensory needs far outlast my sensory resources. Often what helps him feel regulated is the opposite of what my nervous system needs. I don't reliably have other adults who can tag in when the sensory input is that he's constantly seeking feels overwhelming on my system. Any suggestions or balancing my sensory needs when the caregiver and the child have different needs? Thank you for all the amazing work you are doing.
This is a tough one.
I feel this to my soul because your sensory needs are your threshold, your cup. We wake up in the morning and your cup is like almost overflowing. And he wakes up in the morning and his cup is like so empty and he's like got holes in it and he's like just clawing to try and feel something. And you are like, I feel it all. So what my go-to is, because I'm on the similar side of this, is going outside first thing in the morning, getting natural sunlight, putting your feet on the grass.
For both of you.
Yes, exactly. Trying to get grounded. I recently started using a grounding mat, which I can't say if it's been helpful or not, but I mean, it can't hurt. So I'm like, let's, when I don't have the time or I can't go sit outside or eating dinner or whatever, I'll just plug that bad boy in, sit on it. Sounds weird to plug it in, but you like plug it into the grounding portion of the outlet.
Oh,
it's interesting.
The grounding portion of the outlet.
The little hole in the bottom. It's like the grounding thing. I don't know.
Interesting. Electricians will understand what you're talking about.
All of the electricians here. There's so many. They're gonna know.
They know.
Okay, so start with that in the morning. Try to get outside as often as possible. That's like the go-to. Maybe go on a hike, because that way he can get his needs met. Hopefully go to a park, although sometimes parks are a little bit overwhelming for me when there's like visual input everywhere and it's kind of hard to keep track of your kiddos.
Ideally, if you can go to the park during the non-busy times, that would be ideal.
Yeah. So from that standpoint, try and get your needs met as often as possible. Sometimes when you're at home and there's no one that can help you and you're just like at your wits' end, just like leaning against a wall could be helpful, because it takes away that aspect of having to, biologically protect yourself from bears and creatures and everything that are coming behind you. So just leaning against the wall can be a helpful tool. Chewing gum, using those noise canceling headphones, crunchy snacks, chewing gum, deep breathing, like those little sensory snacks throughout the day. Those little tools can help you proactively regulate your nervous system, because that's what we want to try and do throughout the day rather than react to his like loud input, crazy seeking input. So those are my go-tos.
I was just reading the top of the question. So he's 5, diagnosed autism and ADHD. There's no OTs in your area. I'm wondering if there's other services available. My other thought is to start talking to him about this, depending on his level of communication. If possible, start helping him identify what he needs and when, and start talking about, like, your body needs more running and jumping than I do. My body needs less of that. So you go run and jump while I do what I need, and kind of start talking to him about your different needs and what your bodies need to feel good, using just simple terminology. The other thing would be, if possible, create a sensory room or a sensory space. This could be his bedroom, where you maybe get some of the gym mats, a giant bean bag. Can you hang a swing in his room? Can you get a pull-up bar for the doorway? Can you create like a tent, like get a pop-up tent and have some tools in there, and just create a space for him that's his and his alone, that he can go to meet his sensory needs when you need a break.
Yeah.
That would be my recommendation for that.
Definitely. Lots of strategies. Hopefully you can take something that will work. If you guys all have questions, if anyone has questions, you can always add your questions into the form in our show notes. We like to answer one at the end of every episode.
As much as possible.
Yes.
The more context you put in the question, the easier it is for us to answer it. Because sometimes we do get questions in there that I'm not throwing anyone under the bus, but I feel like it's helpful. Like, if you put in the question box, handwriting difficulties, that doesn't really help lead us anywhere. So just as much context as possible if you want us to answer a question.
And if you have a minute to leave us a review, we really appreciate those. If you want to, take a minute and like write out a review, we love those. We love hearing those. They really just bring so much joy to us. I mean, we've been doing this for like 7 years.
Holy crap.
Which is wild.
That is wild.
Sometimes we need a little pizzazz, like, let us know that you're actually listening and that it's helpful.
Take a screenshot, share it on social media, tag us at All Things Sensory Podcast to let us know you're listening.
Yeah. We appreciate it. Follow us on the gram at All Things Sensory Podcast, and we'll plan on seeing you next week.
Okay, bye.
Thank you so much for listening to All Things Sensory by Harkla.
If you want more information on anything mentioned in the show, head over to harkla.co/podcast to get the show notes.
If you have any follow-up questions, the best place to ask those is in the comments on the show notes, or message us on our Instagram account, which is at Harkla_family or at All Things Sensory Podcast. If you just search Harkla, you'll find us there.
Like we mentioned before, our podcast listeners get 10% off their first order at Harkla. Whether it's for one of our digital courses or one of our sensory swings, the discount code SENSORY will get you 10% off. That's SENSORY.
Head to harkla.co/sensory to use that discount code right now.
We are so excited to work together to help create confident kids all over the world. While we make every effort to share correct information, we're still learning.
We will double check all of our facts, but realize that medicine is a constantly changing science and art.
One doctor or therapist may have a different way of doing things from another.
We are simply presenting our views and opinions on how to address common sensory challenges, health-related difficulties, and what we have found to be beneficial that will be as evidence-based as possible.
By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical condition in either yourself or your child.
Consult your child's pediatrician or therapist for any medical issues that he or she may be having.
This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast.
Thanks so much for listening.